Gentlemen, how are you today?
Hanging in there, hanging in there. I gotta run to the head real quick. I'll be right back.
We'll have a couple minutes.
Back to back meetings.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We have torrential rain right now here in Ohio and high winds. It's great.
Gray skies, but still dry.
Hello.
Hello, Adolfo. How are you?
Still a little bit jet lagged, and I'm at QCon, so
Oh, that's
Yes.
fun.
yeah,
At least you're somewhere interesting.
yeah, I'm missing out on all the fun, but this is more fun for me. So
Well,
good.
we'll try to make it super exciting for you today.
Yeah, fun is what you make. So
We'll give everybody a few minutes to see if we get some more folks roll in. Hello. We'll get started in about a minute. We'll give folks just a little bit more time. Put a link to our agenda in the chat if you'd like to mark your attendance, and if you have any open items you'd like to talk about, please add them. All right, everybody. It is 3 after the hour. Welcome to the April 17th edition of the OpenVEX SIG call. I put a link to our agenda in the chat. If I could ask everyone to mark your attendance. And then if you have any open items you'd like to discuss, please put those under the open section. We'll get to those in a little bit. A couple little items for bookkeeping as we roll forward. First off, do we have any volunteers that are interested in helping us take notes today? One of the most important functions of the meeting is helping us take notes, because we'll have a lot of people look at the notes that can't attend the call.
yeah,
I
can help.
Awesome. Thank you all. Every little bit helps. We appreciate all contributions. All right. Our next item of business is, do we have any new friends here today that wanted to introduce themselves and say hello to the group?
Possibly me. Hi. I guess this is not the first OpenVEX SIG meeting, right? Second. Sorry, I missed the first.
We're
Hi.
heartbroken.
Yeah, I think we'll all be okay, hopefully. Hi, for those of you who I don't know or who don't know me, Art Mannion. I am work at a small shop that's a contractor to CISA. I am heavily involved in the CISA community VEX working group. I think it's what it's called. So that's how I got to OpenVEX land. I've been involved in other OpenSSF stuff as well, so I'm familiar with the overall group and some of the people here. Hello to those of you who I don't know yet, and those of you who I do know. Hi. I'm in a loud place. I'm going to be on mute and all that. So, but I'm listening.
Thank you, Art. Always a pleasure to have you here. Anyone else want to introduce themselves to the group? All right. Moving forward, I would love for us to kind of kick off each meeting and look at any open issues or PRs that might be in front of the group. I think today we don't have anything, so we'll skip past this. But in the future, I'd like us to get in the habit of reviewing what's going on within our GitHub repo. I would encourage anyone to put any open issues that they want to discuss a little below, and we'll jump to that after our items in the agenda. Did Dan join? Dan. I'll take a follow up with Dan. Part of the process of accepting the spec and the software is an OpenSSF LF legal review. So I just want to get a pulse from Dan, kind of where we are with that. He had filed an issue in the TAC repo. So I will follow up and I will update the notes after I have that information. Any questions about that?
So does this concern the TAC and the LF?
Yes. So anytime there's any donation, the LF legal wants to go through and they look at the licensing and just to make sure that we're clear for the transfer. So I know that Dan had opened the issue, and I'll post the link to it here once I get done talking. That's just we want to make sure we get all that done before we formally start, modifying software or anything, or actually copying things into like the OpenSSF repo. All right, I'm going to flip the order a little bit. Let's talk. Adolfo and I had chatted briefly on Slack right as we were just getting started, and a proposal in front of us, kind of how we want to manage our work. An idea can be we are scheduled for every other week on the foundation calendar, and we could potentially alternate the topics of those calls and have one call focused on any changes we need to talk to about the spec or the CLI interface or anything like it. I know we have the Rust and the Go kind of alternate projects. So if we wanted to talk about those kind of more technical things, so the A topics could be technical. And then the B topics, it's also important for us to get engaged within the broader VEX community. There's a lot of people, a lot of talk about VEX, and there's a lot of tools out there in the world. So we may want to focus on some efforts on evangelism. Like we might want to say, we know that the open source European Summit is coming up. Maybe we want to have a talk there to introduce people to the OpenVEX software and spec, for example. So the idea would be potentially alternating between the technical and then the kind of the evangelism topics. So I wanted to kind of put that in front of the group and see, is that something we wanted to do? Do we want to blend the two? How would we like to proceed?
This is Isaac. I mean, one question that I would have around kind of how we want to structure these meetings is, what are the outcomes we're trying to drive? Like what do we consider success like? And I think there's two parts to that. At least one is, what is success for VEX as a thing? And then what is success for OpenVEX within the OpenSSF, which may be different. They're probably, hopefully overlapping. But I think maybe we can frame the discussion about how do we want to use these meetings in those terms, like kind of, okay, where do we want, like an example could be, where do we want to be at the end of the year, right? And then if we can agree on that as a group, we can figure out, okay, how best do we get there across a series of meetings? It's not clear to me at the moment kind of what what success looks like for this working group. And part of the question I would have in addition is when there's development, and then there's ecosystem, or sorry, evangelism was the two. Something else with VEX, like it feels to me like VEX as a thing is immature enough that it's not even really operationalizable at the moment. And so I wonder whether we need a track for that. Like, how does it become operationalized? Seems at least adjacent to the OpenVEX specification. Like the OpenVEX specification is useless unless it can be operationalized in a workflow. And what does that look like? Maybe a topic for this group. I'll stop because I see Jay has his hand up too.
Those are excellent points. And before I let Jay talk, I was negligent. I skipped over an important piece for us, which kind of touches on the latter part of your discussion, Isaac, is I want to have us provide updates on what the larger VEX community is doing, the CISA working group. A lot of us are participate in. And I think it'd be important for us to get readouts from that, the people that participate there, so we're all aware of kind of the state of VEX, and then we can modify ourselves how we want to strategically support that. And then I'll defer to Jay and then Adolfo.
She's coming off of mute. So as a caveat to what Isaac just said, and also a caveat to the nature of the discussion, I absolutely do think we should split off. We should have some sub committees underneath, especially since the spec, the OpenVEX spec, is so tightly coupled with things like the CISA VEX working group. So we should have a subcommittee that can bring back those conversations from that working group. Krob and I sitting there every Monday morning, and it's great fun. It's great fun. But to bring those conversations back here to this forum, right, which only happens a few hours later, right? So that's one. There should be one that deals just with the technical portion, just with VEX CTL in terms of the tooling, right? There should be that one there, and then of course this one to bring all of those things up, to have the conversation here, or at least to formalize that conversation in such a way that we can bring it to the larger working group. I know that sounds like a lot, but for the purposes of organization and structure in the organization, that's a working model in my mind.
And before I jump to Adolfo, one of the things I would like to try to get cleared up today is exactly to Isaac's point. I'd like us to kind of lay out what our goals are, what our mission and vision are. And we know we have a proposal, and part of that is going to get documented in our README MD file. So I think we should talk about kind of what we would like to see out of this group and kind of what some of the individual goals are. And I agree with Jay's points, and take it away, Adolfo.
Yeah, I was going to do some suggestions on what I think success looks like, and one of them has to do with the success of VEX itself. So one of the things that I kind of disagree, that VEX is not operationalizable right now. I feel we have, at least for this implementation, we have tooling, libraries, and a good enough design that it can be put to work. But I may be wrong, but I see this project as an important trailblazer to show if VEX is ready or not. So one of the goals of what I see as success is getting enough use cases for this implementation of VEX so that we can contribute back information to the overall working VEX group, so that we can give them lessons learned on it's there or not, because we're missing this and that, but based on experience and actual not implementations, but projects generating VEX information. And this is on the technical side, one of the successes I would like to see. And on the evangelism side, I would like that those experiments to be enough in enough projects so that we can validate that success with evidence from the field.
So we have three very good points. Let's talk about that. Any comments for what Isaac, Jay, or Adolfo said? Everyone agrees. Your three gentlemen were brilliant. No further discussion needed.
Not every day, but
But so let's zero in maybe on what the thread Isaac was pulling, and Adolfo gave us a good suggestion. I like the idea of having exemplars of people using VEX and OpenVEX, that we can kind of have that experimentation and evidence and report that back to the larger work streams. What are there any other goals or anything else anyone here in the group would like to see out of VEX, the larger standard, or the OpenVEX implementation specifically?
I think to Adolfo's point, we need to also have some sort of like onboarding guidance for, how you would actually get started using this. I think there's a lot of interest, people wanting to use it, and then just not really knowing how to actually connect their project to OpenVEX documents.
It's awesome. I like that idea of having that kind of onboard materials to kind of make it very simple for a development team to look at and implement. That'd be wonderful. Any other suggestions at this time? We won't close off on this. This will be kind of an open thing we continue to talk about in Slack and our mailing list and then our next calls. But I'd like to try to put a couple points on paper so that we can start to get some forward momentum.
And then, sorry, one more point. I think that we also need some sort of, I think we need to be really clear about how this connects to SBOM efforts. I think the two concepts are very tightly linked. Like, not many people are just going to be generating OpenVEX without thinking about how it connects to SBOM. So probably need to keep both formats in mind. I don't know how Cyclone DX would support something like OpenVEX, or if they would be open to that, but yeah, just making that connection clear as well.
Yeah, very in the initial discussions, we had talked about SPDX, Cyclone DX, and CSAF as different communities we wanted to talk to at least. And I think we all agree everybody using some kind of VEX is wonderful. Nobody using VEX is terrible.
And also, let's not forget SPDX was pushing really hard to get their VEX implementation ready for the upcoming launch of 3.0.
Mm-hmm. So do I recall, Jay, did you type up a proposal for our mission and vision for us that maybe we could look at and chew on to see if that aligns with everyone's understanding?
I did type up something. Give me 1 second. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier this morning. Let me open up what I have. I do not have it here on this computer though. So that's the rub in that. Give me 1 second. 1 second. And it's real quick too. It's not even something it's real quick.
And while Jay is searching, another community we might want to reach out to within the OpenSSF is the OSV team. They're most of them are in Sydney, Australia, but that's another group where there's some energy behind, and that there may be some collaboration opportunities there. Maybe not. I don't know, but something to at least think about. Because like right now, I believe every GitHub advisory is backed by an OSV entry. So maybe that would be a nice opportunity to partner up. Maybe they also could have an OpenVEX statement.
Yeah, I mean, before OpenVEX was OpenVEX, we were discussing the need for this. So I think we can reach some progress there.
So while Jay is searching, Art or Adolfo, you also participate in the CISA group. Do you have any kind of updates or any kind of recap you want to share with the team and kind of on the progress of those folks?
I think Adolfo, well, anyway, I'll go. Oh, there's Adolfo, sorry. We can both go. The CISA community-oriented VEX working group is working on a when to issue VEX paper, also a bit of a who should issue a VEX paper. I'm sort of personally split on this. On one hand, the answer is whenever you want, whoever you are, a very short paper. Others feel the need for some more guidance, which is totally fair and fine. The first half of me is just, I've been doing this for too long and don't want to get complicated anymore. But that's the current effort going on there. I was told today on the meeting, and I think you all might have been there, the minimum requirements for VEX paper they hope to have it published before RSA, which is like a week, I think. So fingers crossed. I've seen some of the internals from my CISA contractor point of view. It's unfortunate. It's just the way things go sometimes. The CISA folks were really trying. As was mentioned on the call today, the political level got involved. A lawyer was on vacation. You could probably create a list of imaginary problems and they all happened, I'm guessing. But real soon now, that's my report. Thanks.
And I could say from my perspective, the group has a lot of energy. I was surprised. We do have some decent open source community representation, which I'm happy about. A lot of more traditional software and hardware suppliers, but there's a decent number of open source folks there. So I think at least our perspective within the VEX community is pretty well represented.
One thing I would like to align is once that document gets sort of finalized, the when to issue VEX, it can serve as a like a starting point to what Rose was suggesting, like generating advice for projects on how to get started, because we will have a bunch of dots dumped into that document, which we can use as a starting point for the guides.
So any questions or feedback on the CISA working group while Jay is imminently getting ready to share his proposal for mission and vision?
You guys are gonna have to give me a couple of seconds. It's not even on my, well, I can't find it on my other computer. So I'm gonna have to rewrite it. I mean, I remember
always
what I wrote.
defer.
It was real short and real sweet. So give me a couple of seconds.
I have a quick question actually. I'm just looking at the document when to issue a VEX, and I mean I'll put some comments if they're welcome, Art. But I mean one of the things that occurs to me as you read the document is that the document speaks about VEX statements and VEX information, not VEX documents, but it does say they would issue a VEX too. And I wonder whether a VEX statement, VEX information, and VEX document are all synonymous, to what extent they might not be, and whether VEX information vended real time by an API, for example, is another way that VEX is conceptualized by this document, or are we just referring to serialized bytes in a file, which I don't know, like how should I think about that in the context of this document?
Multi-part answer, and I'm chuckling, and I think Grove is smiling. Puerco should be smiling. Some of this was debated hotly in the past 6 months at the VEX working group. So comments welcome. The short version, especially at the state that document is in, I would not be concerned yet that the words VEX information, statement, or document mean anything just yet.
Got it.
Unless it got edited out, the about to be published minimum requirements doc does make a very clear distinction between a VEX document that can contain one or more VEX statements. That was a long bit of discussion, and it ended up being, you know, a bit of an arbitrary choice as to how to organize the information. That document also explicitly says APIs are okay and services are okay. So the concept of the document, the concept of the statement are concepts. They can be printed out. They can be in a RDF document. They could be API derived. It's all fine and good. Yeah, the current SysOfX wind issue of X is very drafty. So comment away, but it's not precise about what the VEX thing is yet.
Got it. That's super helpful. Thank you.
The current doc is what you get when you have 20 people editing the same document at the same time without anyone exerting editorial control yet. So I expect once it's further along, someone will go through and harmonize the language.
Makes sense. Thank you.
If no one else does, I'll be throwing a fit if those words aren't used properly. So we'll get to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but some of those were like already have their own, like Art said, like they already have their own place and definition in the minimum requirements for VEX document, which the draft, I mean, we can probably share it here.
Yeah, and just tangentially, it's a very interesting coalition where there are traditional software hardware providers. There's some open source folks, a bunch of people that represent like the automotive industry. That seems to be a very big concern for the group, is issuing VEXs for cars. So yeah, it's an interesting group of people that show up.
Yeah, and this is why I feel it's such an important thing that we share back the information, because a lot of the ideas who have gone into the initial VEX design have come from just a theoretical point of view, and not everybody envisions the future of VEX in the same way. Some people see it as more, you know, manual, people-oriented thing, and others envision like a more automated, like zero human intervention in the whole process. So I think once we start flowing this information through the supply chain, we'll see what works and what doesn't.
That makes sense. I mean, I think one of my observations in the space generally is that I think the executive order and the SBOM requirement has required companies to pave a transport left to right through their supply chains for transmitting attestations and information to get SBOMs at a minimum left to right through the supply chains. And once that pathway is paved, it's going to be very interesting to see what else we can load on that same truck, right? In the way of, hey, there's salsa provenance, there's VEX, there's all kinds of other attestations you might want to kind of reuse that transport for. And so I think the executive order, has done this really useful job of providing a forcing function to create this pathway for security metadata through supply chains.
I'm personally very excited. Been involved with upstream open source security for a long time. So I'm interested to see upstream starting to produce some of this stuff and seeing how that filters down. And then as an employee of a large commercial organization, I sure wish we would have had something like VEX during Log4Shell, because I personally had to answer like 1,000 emails like, no, this is not affected. No, this other thing is also not affected. So it would have been super useful to have something like this as a vendor in our tool bag.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've seen product teams, including some at Google, who have like kind of a VEX done in a spreadsheet kind of thing, right? Where, hey, we've got a list of, known vulnerabilities which are nominally included, but in fact, not exploitable, and here's why. But that meant that information is maintained very ad hoc today.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm excited for VEX.
Yeah, because like a large traditional organization like ours, we have no way to officially state we're not affected about something. We have the vulnerability handling process is very well oiled and practiced, but when you're not affected, we don't have an official method to do that. And I think, again, this is another outlet, a method for us to handle that.
Yep. Definitely.
All right. So this is this is what I had, as basic as this is, but there's more words. If I can find what the hell are, there's more on my other computer, there's more words. I'll show this here. So this is real quick. Like I said, I remember it off the top of my head. So I did just basic vision, mission, and scope. Right? Vision, very large, mission, a little smaller, and then the scope are just a few things, right? So in this particular, for our particular group, scope is OpenVEX specification, VEX community involvement, right? We're spaced out everywhere, and then VEX tool creation. That's the scope, right? But then I went very wide with this vision, right? Something that's internationally recognized, tightly coupled with open developed industry best practices, and then a universally accepted and centralized use tool for development of VEX documents, plain and simple, right? And then down into the mission of this group, right? The mission specifically to create a universal industry accepted VEX specification and tool set for creating multi-language machine readable VEX documents. We get that. I shrugged the shoulders very, very quickly. I mean, that's what I wrote in a nutshell. There was maybe some more colorful words and all that, but as a real quick and dirty, this is what I had.
What does the group think about that fast little writing? Is that something we think we can get behind? What alternate ideas or suggestions do we have?
Is the internationally recognized, is that like foreshadowing that we're going to apply for some type of like ISO certification, or is that just saying that we want everyone to use this? Maybe I'm reading into it too much.
That's the beauty of a vision, though, isn't it? A vision is aspirational at best, with a large parts of it being achievable in the grand scheme, right? But that's the beauty of a vision.
I guess
something for us to aspire to.
Okay, then I guess I'm just asking, like, what's our vision? I mean, do we see like formal standardization in our future, or if we could just snap our fingers and achieve that vision, like what does that look like for us?
I think that's a point of discussion amongst the group, right? I know that there's a specification involved. What's the ultimate objective? Remembering Oasis already has CSAF, a CSAF specification, right? You have a couple of others out there with their own specification. But if the idea is to create a specification, which OpenVEX does have one, I think I don't know what you do with a specification outside of try to get it published or accredited by an accreditation or certification body, right? So I'm not sure what that looks like, but I can't see why. Also, I mean, who's to say, right? I have down there scope VEX community involvement. Who's to say that we don't reach out and get with Oasis, right? Who's to say we don't know the same way that we're talking to and I know we're talking to CISA because or that VEX working group, because a lot of the same people here are there, right? So I know that conversation's happening. But who's to say that we can't crosswalk over or on over to Oasis and have those conversations there? Maybe it's a partnership of sorts. We don't know.
With the CISA community minimum requirements hat on, there was discussion of what the future of that requirement might be, a lot of this was sort of in the midst of development of the document discussion. People asked, suggested not pushing it to be a more official standard somewhere. As we are probably all familiar with, sort of the completely loose volunteer standards development has its downsides, maybe some upsides. A formal specification or standard doc has value. OpenVEX, my reading of it so far, is an actual technical spec, which has some benefits as well to loose words on paper. So that could be OASIS, that could be IETF, it could be ISO. ISO SC27 is might be a little closer to the written minimum requirements document versus the actual JSON schema sort of thing. There are technical docs in ISO, but the cybersecurity stuff is usually more controls and processes and things. Anyway, I think the word international in there, which has caused some conversation, is fine. Even without formally standardizing it, right? Somebody in a different country can go get OpenVEX and use it. Probably already are doing that, right? So we are international just by being open, I think, also.
If I stuck this in the chat, I don't have access to the at least I don't. It's telling me I don't have access yet to the drive. To the Google Drive, and I know we opened up one because I asked for one to be opened up. Surprise, surprise, right? I asked for one to be opened up, and I don't have access to it. If I put this in the chat, though, Crow, think you could stick this in the document there? I did not create this, even on my other computer, in the document on that drive.
Yeah. Yes, I can do that. If you want to refresh your browser page, I just added you as precisely.
Oh, okay. Give me 1 second. Then.
And then it looks like Isaac and then Jeffrey have questions or statements.
One of the things I think it would be useful for either the vision or mission to speak to is how we see OpenVEX alongside other VEX standards. Like, do we want this to be the standard or a standard? And if we want it to be a standard, we should make that clear and make the interoperability is on our list of goals as well. Or maybe we decide that we want OpenVEX to win overall and OpenVEX will be the one true VEX, in which case interoperability matters much less to us. But I think that we should have something in the vision or mission to speak to how we see the right outcome there. And I suspect it's that OpenVEX is a great solution, but it's not the only one. We know that, and we interoperate readily with every other great solution.
Jeffrey.
My thought was along the same lines in terms of what Jay had shared, didn't even mention the word standard. And I'm reminded of the KXCD cartoon of there's several standards. This is terrible. We should get these all unified so that everyone can be on the same page. And now there's several standards plus one. So I tongue firmly planted in cheek, but I do think we should sort of think about how we want this to relate to what else is going on from a standards perspective. And if it's one of several, then I agree, interoperability is important. If this is if the goal is for this to become a sort of de facto one, it's something for us to think about collectively as we move forward, I think.
Mm-hmm. Those are all good points. And it's also a matter of, do we have
meeting notes?
Go ahead, Jay.
I said they're already in the meeting notes.
Great. Okay. And I was going to add, it's also a matter of, do we have people that are interested and able to participate in that type of work? We may not have people that are interested in doing that. And do we have expertise? I think we definitely have people that have expertise in that if we wanted to go that path. Art's been doing standards for a long, long time. So we can kind of lean into him if that's a path the group wants to take. And if we don't, I think right now, I don't know that we have to make that decision, but I don't want to close that off as a, keep our options open. Adolfo.
Yeah, so one of the things that I feel we should capture in regarding the interoperability is that we want any interoperability to flow from OpenVEX up to the CISA working group and then down to the other implementations. And we can be friendly in terms of enabling features, or when it doesn't break like the architecture of OpenVEX, right? And we can like create features especially in the tooling, maybe not in the spec, but in the tooling, to have a better communication with the other standards. But I feel it's important to note that if we follow what the working group has been working on, then we should be interoperable, because a lot of discussion went into that. So I think that's the way we should do it. And I mean, we have already some, last week I merged some patches to enable reading CSAF documents.
Nice.
And so you can now create an OpenVEX document by merging an OpenVEX document and a CSAF document into one. So that's one example, but that works because we're share some features which were decided by the working group.
Isaac.
So I was just been staring at the vision and mission thing. I mean, I think broadly, I think it's there's probably a little bit of wordsmithing. We probably need to add a little bit about, interop if we care about it. But I think in terms of the overall concision and altitude, I think these are ideal. Like, I think these are the right altitude, the right kind of scope, the right balance of, pragmatic versus visionary. I think we could probably wordsmith them. The one extra thing we might want to think about incorporating somewhere in the vision is that this is useful in practice, right? That, like, I don't want to work on a VEX specification that's well specified, awesome, international, it's an ISO standard, but it didn't meaningfully help anyone, right? And so I think that, like, we should talk about what are the outcomes, and that there is substantive improvement in overall vulnerability management in the ecosystem. And that seems like an important part of the vision that we don't have today. But I think the altitude and scope and everything is just about exactly right.
That's why I put the word used. I specifically put accepted and centralized used tool.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you could say no one would use it if it wasn't useful or if it wasn't providing value, but I think we should make that explicit. I think we should say, like, used to great effect, or used to substantive benefit, or I don't know what it is, but like used and provides valuable outcomes.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I agree.
And it's much easier to do that wordsmithing now that, Jay took the hard work of putting the initial draft down. Now we can
100%. And I'm grateful to Jay as ever for doing that.
wrench around with it. So maybe that's something I had the point above, that one of the things we need to do is to have the README file for our SIG kind of put together, so that as people that are curious about our efforts in the foundation find our repo, they'll have a description of kind of what we're about, what we're doing. So maybe this is something that we would want to put in an initial draft of a PR in that README file, then we can iterate over it there. Any additional thoughts or comments about the initial vision, mission, and scope? Good conversation so far, everybody. I really appreciate it. All right. If there are no further comments on this, I'll work with Jay and we'll start to get that initial PR put together. And I'll shoot a note in the Slack into the mailing list for have people review it and comment on it. And maybe by our next call, we can actually push the button and we'll have a real README file that people can find and join on in. All right. Let's.
Where do I find the mailing list? Sorry, is that in the doc somewhere? I don't think I'm on that.
It is. Is it the top of the document?
It is. There it is. Top of the. Oh no, hang on, that's something else. Oh,
Yeah,
there it
if
is.
you-
Yeah,
Yep.
I got it.
Click on that. That should take you to. There's a little tool that the foundation uses. So you can sign up.
On it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Normally, my experience with the working groups here in the OpenSSF is the mailing lists tend to be me sending out announcements and begging people to vote on things. They don't generally have a lot of traffic, but if we want to use that like a traditional project mailing list, that I'm all for that. However we want to leverage the tools there. But just it normally ends up me kind of talking to the wall. All right, somebody put an entry about supporting Trivy. That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was me. I forgot to link the issue, but there is a PR in flight of Trivy, the scanner, gaining support for VEX, and the person who's working on that is supporting the Cyclone DX implementation and the OpenVEX implementation. So we may find that we have that last piece of supporting the scanner in the real world product soon enough. Yeah, and
Great.
let me. Yeah, I'm gonna look for the PR and share it.
Thank you. Any comments about that? I'm very excited about that. People actually using it is great.
Yeah, so one of the initial thoughts on how we could get support for VEX working in a quicker fashion was to build into VEXCTL filters for the scanners. So the way it works is VEXCTL could consume all of the VEX documents, and you could scan an artifact, a container image or whatever, and then from the output of the scanner, filter it through the tool, and it would read both the VEX information and the scanner results, and then filter out all of the documents. But the problem with that one is that when talking to people interested in VEX, they felt it was a little bit of cheating if you did that. I mean, it would be best if scanners themselves wrote support for VEX in their products. There's in VEXCTL, there is already a demo, like a proof of concept of that. And if you output Sarif from the scanners, it more or less can read it and filter out the results based on VEX. But we didn't pursue that like fully. But if someone is interested, we can chat in one of the next sessions.
Excellent. Any additional feedback or comments? All right. And our last item on the agenda is, hey, we have an SBOM panel at OpenSSF Day. Who wants to talk about a panel? Yeah, and we'll get you the PR. Oh, that's you too. Look at that. So when Adolfo's done talking, he'll get us the PR.
Sorry. Yeah, so I got invited to speak at OpenSSF Day as part of an SBOM panel that's going to be there. So and my initial CFP submission was about OpenVEX. So since I got invited, I might just as well, bring the topic to the table. So if you have any ideas, or as a community we want to convey a message to people listening and tuning into what's new with SBOMs. I think that's the title of the panel. Just let me know, and I'll be sure to convey our message to the audience.
Is that at OSSNA?
Yes, exactly, the day before.
Do you need to register for that, or if you're going to be at OSSNA, is that something that you can just attend?
I think you can register, and it's like $10 or something. No,
there is
$10 is
there's an
99.
additional fee.
Yeah, the $10 one is for the SPDX submit, I think. But yeah, you can register for a small fee.
And you do that through the website. I'll track down the registration link, and then if you have questions or comments, I can put you in touch with the OpenSSF folks if you're curious to negotiate. But that's awesome, and I would love to see us. There we go. Thank you. One of like the evangelism goal, especially, I would like us to figure out a plan of where we would like to go to talk about this at industry and developer conferences, so that we can kind of get that mind share and get more people thinking and talking about it.
And one of those firms must be the security scanners, because they're the final recipients, one of the final recipients of this information.
Mm-hmm. Envelope?
Sorry, the envelope, please. Security scanners, vulnerability management scanning industry market is probably a huge and important discussion. They could consume VEX, they could produce VEX, they can still disagree about the status of something in VEX. Any way to help that market and industry? You know, I hear complaints nonstop about false positives. My only experience with them has been a false positive recipient. So yeah, interesting. Sorry, just it struck me as, well, VEX can help this, and I hope it can. It's at least a chance to talk with them, I hope. But it might be that VEX can simply continue the status quo of, you're affected. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Anyway, sorry, someone has their hand up. I apologize.
No, I want to comment on your on this topic. Is that
Yeah,
I'm
please.
actually, I have a talk that I started to give at various so far for security researchers. We did a bunch of research around vulnerability scanners, performance, benchmarking, false positives, and false negatives also, which is, I think, a much bigger problem, because then you have vulnerabilities that you don't know about. So everyone talks about the false positives, but yeah, and that's also a big issue. And there's no transparency whatsoever, because the scanners have no interest of showing you that what they miss or what they don't know, and the rate of their false positives. So I dealt with it a lot, and I recently, what you're saying resonates with me, because I really think that I'll give you in a nutshell the view. Basically, more code is being written, more vulnerabilities are being discovered, and we now have more visibility because of SBOM, and so it's just, it goes exponentially, and we currently, vulnerability management can't, they have huge backlogs, they can't patch everything, it's not scalable. So I think, and this is my talk basically, that we need a new paradigm for vulnerability management that doesn't, you won't patch everything. We need to come to a realization, and you won't patch everything that's high and critical, but the percentage of vulnerabilities that are actually exploited or exploitable, it's a fraction. And this is a more realistic target, and that's where VEX, I see VEX come in, and I think in the utopian vision is that you'll have various vendors that update VEX based on various conditions. So you have a scanner that scans the runtime, then it can tell you if something is not exploitable because the code isn't running in memory. Or you have a configuration security tool that tells you that these vulnerabilities are not exploitable because the specific configuration that is required for the exploitation isn't relevant. And then you have threat intel that tells you if that vulnerability is even exploited in the wild or not. And you merge all these things together using VEXes, and then you can have a tool that shows you everything in one view, and that's kind of why. And then it's automatic, and you have CSAP that you can also digest advisories which are machine readable, and then you can mesh all this together and hopefully get to a point where you know what's important based on what's actually exploitable or what's actually exploited. And I think VEX should play a huge part in this future of vulnerability management. And the end.
Solved.
Thank you, Dan. That's great. No, I think we're all in aggressive agreement. And in the future, if we are interested in, if we want to specifically address like the security scanner vendors, I have some contacts within Red Hat where they, before I left, we had started a campaign of trying to encourage the scanner vendors of leveraging Red Hat's vulnerability data as opposed to like an NVD, or at least kind of comparing the two and presenting both alternatives. So if we're interested, I can talk to the folks behind that, and we can kind of, maybe there's some lessons learned or some contacts we might want to make to talk with folks in the security scanner industry. And we also have static and dynamic scanners. I don't know if we're interested in like talking to like a Sneak or a Sonatype. Those types of folks are members of the foundation, would be much easier to at least kind of talk to. I know that some of the security scanner folks are touchy and territorial about their amazing algorithms. Oh, good. That's great. Adolfo expects to talk to some here at KubeCon. Isaac.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what you were saying about security scanners. And I think, and again, this comes back to the scope of problems we're trying to solve in this group, but it seems to me that, you know, the interchange format for the information is a part of the problem we're trying to solve. Another part of the problem we're trying to solve is, and it comes back to what I was saying about operationalization, like if, you know, like making the determination about, am I exploitable or not from this vulnerability? I may decide that I'm not for version N, and that may be a human assessment. I go in and say not reachable, right? But it seems to me that that human assessment is going to be necessary every single version that I cut, because in theory, version N+1 and N+2 and whatever may now be exploitable. And I've not seen any, I don't know, any systematized way to approach that part of the problem. And so VEX as an interchange format is an interesting, yes, that's part of like the end-to-end story. But in terms of how do you make this real, like how do you make it, how do you make those individual human judgments of not reachability or exploitability scalable, seems to be at least as big of a part of a problem. And I wonder whether that we consider that in scope for this group, even though it's not a concern that's local to OpenVEX itself. It seems like we could solve OpenVEX as an interchange format, but unless we solve the other operationalization part, we haven't actually gotten anywhere.
I think that's definitely something we want to write down and talk about as a group. Is that a task we want to wrestle with in the future? Definitely. And then to have the controversial statement to end the call. What I've noticed the upstream working group kind of dancing around the issuance of VEX is that how do you trust the producer of that VEX statement? And that's probably something we may want to invest some time in at some point, to provide mechanisms to show maybe our VEX statement gets signed with like a SIG store, you know, on this day, Probe signed this VEX and it's in the register, and that statement was not tampered with throughout the supply chain to at least provide some assurance. And that's a problem we'll probably want to wrestle with at some point and at least participate in.
Totally. Sounds good. I'm super optimistic about this problem space and this group. So thank you for having me here.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad to have it. Excellent. So any other final thoughts? We're at the top of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Excellent conversation. We'll go through the notes and try to arrange the agenda for next time. Please reach out to each other on Slack and the mailing list, and look forward to talking with y'all, and enjoy KubeCon, Adolfo. Cheers.
Bye all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.